Hello, my name is Kenneth, and today I'll be talking about my OAD project 2, which will be fast bank, and the project name is actually called fast banking. So, to start it off first, I have two use case diagram that I have two use cases that I've already chosen, in which the first one will be transferring funds, and the second one will be the loan approval, in which the transferring fund will have to be once the customer transfers the fund, they have to get the authorization from the administrator, the bank administrator, while for the second one will be once the customer fills up all the forms and requirements for the loan, they will then be checked if they'll be eligible and have the authorization by the loan officer. So for the first part, I have my sequence diagram in which it shows if the customer logs on to the form and they verify their credentials. If the information is valid after the system checks that the credential is correct and valid the information, they will request the bank account from the customer to type in for in which their own personal information. Else they will then have the else okay, if the information is not valid, then they will reject the login. Moving on, there'll be display options, in which the user will then will have a range of options to select which function they wish to use. In this scenario, they'll be using the transfer function, and then since they're using the transfer function, they have to confirm if their pin is valid. So the system will kind of prompt if the pin is valid or not. So if the pin is valid, then they will request the amount they wish to transfer. Otherwise, they'll reject the user's access for that. Moving on, there will also be an amount entered, which once they enter the amount that was requested, they will start the transaction, and then they'll start checking their bank account if they have a sufficient amount. If they don't have a sufficient amount, then they will reject the else part here will showcase that they will reject the entire transaction completely. However, if they have enough funds, then they will proceed to ask the user to choose the account they wish to deposit in, and then if once they've chosen the account and typed it in, then they will verify the account number. Once that's done, then they will request admin's approval in the transaction form control all the way to the bank administrator, and the bank administrator has two alternate flows, in which one, if they accept, then the transaction is successful, and then they will display the transaction is successful, and then they'll credit the amount of the user and deposit the amount into the other to the other account. While if the transaction is unsuccessful because the administrator declines it, then it will show that it doesn't work. While for my second sequence diagram is a loan approval, in which the customer will just basically log in, then they'll fill out the form, they'll check eligibility, and they'll seek approval, and then they'll consult with the admin. Once they consult the admin, they get the bank details. Once that's done, basically it will return we're assuming they will return the bank details to them, and then after that they have the loan officer have all the bank details, and then they'll check if you're like actually eligible firstly, and secondly whether you know they would approve of their loan of the customer. So they'll go back and then they'll check with the company, in which there are two alternate flows. One is that the company approves of it, then they'll show the application success, the display loan success, while the other is after that they'll deposit the money, and then the other flow is that they'll deny. If the denial from the company starts, then application will be basically denied, and then they'll display that loan cannot be gotten from the company. Moving on, I have my VoPC diagram, in which the transferring fund here, in which for the verified credentials here, right, as I mentioned earlier, is to kind of check if the login and password name is correct, while for the request bank account is to ask the customer to key in their own bank information so that the system can check if it's correct. Then the display option will allow, as mentioned earlier, will allow to choose function they wish to use in that case. So these are all the things I mentioned earlier, most of it. A second VoPC diagram for the loan officer, in which there is the boundary, the control, the entities, and then this is a one-to-one one-way kind of transaction, because most of this only can have one person on it, otherwise it'd be very confusing for the bank system. Moving on with the database design, in which we have the foreign keys in red actually, while the blue is the like non null thing, so they cannot like obsolete the thing. They have to type in their first name and last name for like the loan officer, so they know which officer they're talking to, the customer knows, and who's on the case. As then here's the transaction. They need the account number, the name of recipient and the amount. Here's the customer name and var character as well. And yeah, basically all the things are shown. The primary keys means that they cannot, like these keys, otherwise they cannot track the thing. So yeah, that's kind of the database design. Okay, thank you for watching this, or